When Burkina Faso's transitional president, Ibrahim Traoré, arrived at a national event held in his honor, no one expected what happened next. It was a sweltering Tuesday in Ouagadougou. The city buzzed with excitement. Burkina Faso's flags fluttered proudly, and children wore T-shirts that read, "Our hero, Ibrahim Traoré." The national civic arena was packed. Thousands had gathered to celebrate the president's efforts in restoring peace, fighting hunger, and bringing dignity back to the people. A sleek, unmarked black Toyota quietly rolled up to the VIP entrance. No motorcade, no sirens. A lone security guard stepped forward, hand raised. "Excuse me, sir. You need a badge to enter." From inside the car, President Traoré blinked. Calmly, he replied, "I am Ibrahim Traoré." The guard frowned. He let out a nervous laugh. "No, sir. The president wouldn't arrive like this." Phones began to rise, cameras rolling. But instead of demanding entry or summoning aides, Traoré did something no one expected. He smiled. Then, without another word, he stepped away from the entrance and began walking, on foot, around the side of the arena. He passed vendors, surprised guards, and murmuring journalists whispering, "Is that really him?" His aides rushed toward him, ready to intervene, but he stopped them with a gentle gesture. "No," he said. "Let the people see me this way." A barefoot child ran up, offering a piece of roasted corn. "President," he asked, "why are you outside?" Traoré bent to the child's level. "Because today isn't about me," he answered. "It's about all of us." As he continued walking, a grandmother behind a fence began to weep. People followed him. No security, no procession, just a man and his people. When he reached a side gate, guards recognized him instantly and moved to open it. "Please don't," Traoré said gently. "I want to enter like everyone else." Meanwhile, inside the arena, organizers were growing anxious. The president's special seat, handcrafted by local artists, sat empty beneath a spotlight. Whispers filled the air. "Where is he?" Outside, Traoré stood quietly in the queue among everyday citizens. Beside him, a farmer asked casually, "You here for the event?" Traoré nodded. "Yes, I'm hoping to learn something." The man chuckled. "Me too. They say the president's a good man." Traoré just smiled. When he finally entered, through the public gate, not the VIP entrance, a hush swept across the arena. Children stopped eating. Elderly women pressed hands to hearts. The music faded. All eyes turned. No entourage, no bodyguards. Just a man in a dust-streaked white shirt and sandals. Silence. Then, one old man rose and declared, "He walks with us, because he is one of us." The arena erupted, not with applause, but with raw emotion. But the most unforgettable moment was still to come. Back at the VIP gate, the young guard stood frozen. Someone had just whispered to him, that was the president. His face went pale. He looked at the entrance list. No photo, no note. He had simply been doing his job. Now his heart pounded. People began to point. Some laughed. Others jeered. Then a firm hand touched his shoulder. He turned and there stood President Traoré. Softly he said, "No one should blame you." Traoré placed a hand gently on the guard's shoulder and said softly, "You did what was right. You followed the rules. Burkina Faso needs men like you." The young man's lips trembled. "Excellence, I didn't know." But Traoré didn't hesitate. He embraced him, genuinely, in full view of the cameras. That one simple hug broke the internet within hours. Hashtags began trending for humble president, Fi Guard of Honor Azakwanapus. Yet inside the arena, something even more powerful was about to unfold. President Traoré was about to take the stage. But he wasn't carrying notes. He brought no speech, no folder. Instead, he carried something else, raw, heavy, and heartbreakingly human. When he stepped forward, the cheering gave way to silence. In his palm, he held a single folded photograph. He looked out at the crowd, thousands of faces, young and old, mothers cradling babies, students, soldiers, farmers. Then he held up the photo. It was faded. A little boy stood barefoot in torn sandals in front of a crumbling mud house. "This," Traoré said, "was me." A collective gasp swept through the arena. He paused, letting the moment sink in. "I wasn't born in a palace. I didn't grow up with power. On the day this photo was taken, I ate only once. I drank from a cracked plastic bottle." His voice cracked. "But someone believed in me. My mother, my teachers, my neighbors. Burkina Faso believed in me." A woman in the audience began to sob. Then another, and another. "No title will ever separate me from where I came from," he continued. I am not your leader because I stand above you. I am your leader because I walk beside you. The entire arena stood, not to cheer but to cry. Behind the stage sat a chair carved from rare wood, embroidered with gold thread, polished for weeks. A throne meant to honor the president. As applause slowly built, Traoré turned to it, looked at it, and shook his head. Instead, he walked past the grand chair and sat on a simple wooden bench, the one usually reserved for the cleaning staff. The crowd was stunned. What is he doing? Someone whispered. A little girl in the front row tugged her mother's sleeve and asked, "Why won't he sit in his chair?" Her mother, wiping away tears, whispered, "Because his heart is bigger than that chair." Traoré sat quietly among the ushers, the stagehands, the volunteers. He looked at each of them and nodded. "I'm not here to be served," he said softly. "I'm here to serve." The moment was captured on camera. BBC, CNN, Al Jazeera, TikTok, Facebook, everyone asked the same question. Is this the most humble president in the world? But the most soul-stirring moment was yet to come. As Traoré sat on the workers' bench, a whisper rippled through the audience. Did you see what he did? Is he okay? Is never sat there before. Then, from the second row, a fragile voice rose, trembling, elderly. Her name was Awa Sanu, a retired midwife from Bobo Dioulasso. Leaning on a cane, she stood and asked the organizers for a moment to speak. They hesitated, but Traoré raised his hand. Let her. A microphone was passed to her. The arena fell into breathless silence. She looked at the president and said, "You don't know me." Her voice quivering. "But years ago, when rebels burned down my clinic and killed my husband, you came." A gasps. Traoré's eyes widened. "You weren't a president then, just a soldier. But you carried my daughter 5 miles through the night to safety." Cameras zoomed in. The crowd fell silent again. A tear rolled down the president's cheek. "And today," she continued, "you showed the world again. You don't need a title to be great. You just need a heart." The crowd erupted into sobs, but Awa wasn't finished. She had brought something with her, and it would break everyone. Slowly, she reached into her worn handbag and pulled out a small white cloth, carefully wrapped in a plastic sleeve. It looked old, faded, fragile, but under the bright lights of the arena, a stain became visible, brownish red, dried with time, but unmistakably blood. Her hands trembled as she held it up. "This," she said, her voice cracking, "is the cloth you wrapped around my daughter's foot when she was bleeding." Traoré stood, stunned. His face had gone pale. Awa continued through her tears. "I never threw it away. Not because it was clean, but because it saved my daughter's life." The crowd fell silent. Even the camera crew lowered their equipment and wiped their eyes. Awa stepped forward. The cloth looked small in her hands, but the moment felt immeasurable. Reverent. She placed it gently in the president's hands, and he did something no one expected. He knelt, right there in front of her. He whispered, his voice barely audible to the cameras, "I remember that day. I just didn't know it mattered this much." Awa leaned down and embraced him, not as a citizen to her president, but as a mother to her son. And in that moment, there was no title, no status, no ceremony, just humanity. But the emotional current wasn't finished. Outside the arena, something incredible was unfolding. Traffic had come to a standstill, not from an accident but from something far more powerful. People were walking, thousands of them, toward the arena. Men, women, even children, in complete silence. No one told them to come. They simply heard about the bench, about the cloth, about the president who sat with janitors and knelt for a grandmother. The news had traveled through phones, radios, and market loudspeakers. And the people came. Some carried candles, some brought flowers, others came with nothing but their bare feet and a heart full of something unspoken. Inside, Traoré stepped out for air, and he froze. The street was full, wall to wall, but no one shouted, no one chanted. They stood, hands over their hearts, as if saying thank you without words. A small boy, maybe 8 years old, broke away from the crowd. He wasn't holding a flag or a sign. He was holding his school report card. "I want to give this to you, President," he said shyly. "Because you're the reason I'm still in school." Traoré bent down, accepted it with both hands, and hugged the boy. Cameras caught the moment. Within an hour, global media picked it up. Burkina Faso president turns ceremony into moment of humanity. This is what leadership looks like. But what happened next stunned even those who thought they'd seen everything. Back inside the arena, as people tried to compose themselves, a commotion stirred at the rear. It was the young security guard, the one who had stopped Ibrahim Traoré at the entrance. He looked shaken, eyes red, hands trembling. Two other guards tried to intercept him, but Traoré raised his hand. Let him through. The young man walked down the center aisle, past generals, ministers, and elders. Then he dropped to his knees before the president. "I didn't know," he said, sobbing. "I didn't recognize you. I was only trying to do my job." The room held its breath. Traoré didn't say a word. He walked up, knelt beside the guard, and gently helped him to his feet. "You were doing exactly what this country needs," he said softly. "You followed your duty, even when you weren't sure." The young guard broke down in his arms. And then something unexpected happened. All around the arena, soldiers began to clap, not just for the president, but for what he represented, that no man and no title is above the principles of service, duty, and humility. The internet exploded again, but what no one knew was that Traoré had one last personal reason for attending this event, something deeply private. As the official program resumed, organizers called President Traoré to the stage. He walked forward, but once again declined the golden chair prepared just for him. Instead, he quietly made his way to the very back row, far from the cameras. There, he pulled out a chair beside a young disabled girl. Her name was Marama. She had been invited quietly, along with her mother, because months earlier, she had written a letter, one that had gone viral. In it, she had asked, "President Traoré, will you ever sit next to someone like me?" That was what Marama had written in her letter months ago. She never got a reply. But now, as the president sat quietly beside her, gently holding her hand, the answer was clear. The hall fell still. A hush swept the crowd. Tears returned. And then something even more profound happened. President Traoré asked for the microphone. With every eye on him, he stood beside the young girl and said, "This chair was never meant to be mine alone. It belongs to every Burkinabe child who dreams, every mother who struggles, every father who falls but rises again. That's who built this country. I'm just sitting among them today." Even the journalists lowered their cameras. This moment wasn't for headlines. It was for healing. But as moving as that was, nothing would compare to what happened the following morning. Before sunrise, with no media, no entourage, and just two plain vehicles, Ibrahim Traoré made a quiet journey. He visited a modest cemetery on the outskirts of Ouagadougou. Most graves there were unmarked, weathered by time, some forgotten. He walked to one in particular, simple, unpainted, and knelt. It belonged to Adama Coulibaly, his best friend, a young soldier who had died saving Traoré's life during a rebel ambush years ago. Traoré had never spoken of him publicly, but now, alone in the morning quiet, with a single flower in hand, he whispered, "Everything I do to honor your sacrifice." He stayed for 30 minutes, silent, remembering. Then something unexpected happened. A child from a nearby village spotted him. Soon a dozen more gathered, barefoot, peeking from behind trees, watching. Traoré looked up, smiled, and waved them over. And there, in the dust, the president sat cross-legged with the children, drawing stars and flags in the sand. No speeches, no guards. Just a man with chalky fingers and a heart that remembered. That photo of Traoré in the dirt with children would become the image of the year. But few knew he was preparing for one final act, one final speech, and it would shake the world. By afternoon, the country was breathless. Social media erupted. The president knelt at a grave. He sat with a disabled girl. He hugged a security guard who stopped him. Post after post ended the same way. Who leads like this anymore? But while the nation reflected, President Traoré made a private phone call to the event organizers. He had one last request. Not to speak from the podium. Not to deliver a grand finale. Not to lead the closing anthem. He asked instead, "Let me walk through the crowd. No security. No microphone. Let the people speak. Just for 1 hour. Let the real heroes tell their stories." The team hesitated. Was it wise? Was it safe? But they agreed. Just before sunset, Traoré entered through the back. No jacket. No script. Just a wooden chair in his hand. He placed it in the middle of the crowd. Sat down. Then pointed to the first man he saw. A retired farmer. "Tell us what you survived," he said gently. The old man stood, hands trembling, and began to speak. One by one others followed, widows, street children, veterans, single mothers. Each voice cracked open the silence. Each story brought tears, but it was the final story that broke Traoré. From the far right of the crowd, a small voice rose. A girl no older than 9, barefoot, thin, clutching a folded piece of cloth. She walked slowly toward him. When she reached him, she unfolded the cloth. Inside was a photo, faded and torn. It showed her father, a soldier, standing beside Traoré years ago during a northern mission. "My papa said you saved him once," she whispered. "But he didn't make it home the second time." The crowd fell silent again. No sound, just quiet, aching tears. Traoré stared at the photo, frozen. Then slowly, he reached into his jacket. From the inner pocket, he pulled out a worn prayer bead, one the soldier had carried. "I've kept this," he said softly, "since the day he died in my arms. I never forgot." He pressed the bead into the little girl's hands. She clutched it to her chest and collapsed in tears. Traoré caught her gently, and for a moment no words were needed. That image, of a grieving child, and a leader on his knees, went viral within minutes. But what the cameras didn't catch was this: President Ibrahim Traoré cried too. Not as a head of state, not as a politician, but as a brother, a soldier, a man who remembered everything. But then President Traoré stood once more and made an announcement no one expected. "Tomorrow morning I will walk. No cars, no soldiers, just me, and anyone who wants to walk with me across the city." The organizers rushed to intervene. It was too risky, too unpredictable, too disorganized, but Traoré simply replied, "Let the people lead. I will follow." And so, the next morning, just as the sun rose over Ouagadougou, the streets began to fill, not for protest, not for politics, but to walk with a man who had proven his heart. Mothers carried children. Old men brought worn flags. Farmers, teachers, nurses, even the security guard from day one, all came. It became known as the Silent March of the People. They walked together through markets, past schools, hospitals, and cemeteries. Along the way, Traoré shook every hand he could. When they reached the final stop, he turned to face the thousands behind him and said, "You don't need to raise your voices to be heard. Walk in truth, and the world will follow." What he didn't know was that someone else had been watching. Not from Burkina Faso, but from beyond its borders. Her name was Mariam Duff, a young journalist from Senegal. She had quietly arrived days earlier to cover the event for a Pan-African news outlet. But what she witnessed went far beyond any headline. She had filmed everything. The moment Traoré was blocked at the gate, his silent kindness to the confused guard, his time with the orphan girl, the cemetery visit, the march, the children in the dust, every gesture, every tear. She had uploaded the clips daily to a small, private channel. And now, after the silent march, her latest post read, "I came to report on a leader. I found a father to the broken, a listener to the poor, a heart the world forgot existed." The video went viral overnight. Millions shared it, and then came the surprise and invitation from the African Union. They didn't ask Traoré to speak about economics or policy. They wanted him to speak about leadership from the heart. But Traoré replied simply, "Let me finish walking with my people first." Because even as the world began watching, his eyes never left home. The final day of the national event arrived. Everyone expected a grand presidential speech. Flags were raised. The stage gleamed. Global media had set up cameras. But when Ibrahim Traoré finally stood before the world, he said nothing. Instead, he called 5 people to the stage: a widow, a teacher, a street boy, the disabled girl, and the farmer from earlier in the week. They spoke for him. No slogans, no applause lines, just truth, pain, hope, and honor. When it was finally his turn to speak, he looked out at the crowd and said, "This country has heard enough of my voice. It's time we listen to yours. I am not here to be celebrated. I am here to serve." And then, he stepped back. The entire place went silent. Then suddenly it erupted. Applause, thunderous and endless. People cried openly. Some dropped their phones just to clap harder. That moment would become known online as the speech that changed nothing and everything. But the biggest surprise of the week was still to come. Because right after the applause, President Traoré vanished from the stage. No interviews, no photo ops, no press conference. He simply walked away, quietly, alone, into the crowd. People called out, but he just smiled and waved. Later, a young boy from the village said he saw him behind the event grounds, helping an old woman push a wheelbarrow near the back gate. A teenager captured it on a blurry phone camera. That photo, a president in the dust, pushing a wheelbarrow, became the most shared image in West Africa that year. Underneath it, someone wrote, "Leadership is not a crown. It's a cloth you use to wipe the tears of your people." And that is how the week ended. No scandals, no drama, no spotlight. Just one quiet man who showed the world that the loudest kind of power is silent compassion. And from that day on, even those who once doubted him began to say, "That's my president." To all my amazing viewers, if this story moved you, if it made you cry, or reminded you what real leadership looks like, please like this video. Leave a comment with your favorite moment. And subscribe, because more stories like this are coming. Let's make the world feel again. Let's honor our heroes. Let's remind the world who Ibrahim Traoré truly is. See you in the next one.